The following program is for informational and educational purposes only. It is not to be considered legal advice. Fraudsters Radio was created to expose the many scams and frauds that have so infected society today. Scammers, fraudsters, and rip-off artists abound, whether it's scamming homeowners with bogus foreclosure relief services, dating fraud, incompetent lawyers, or consumer rip-offs. It's high time the public has a voice. If you work in a profession that deals with fraud, or if you believe you were or are a victim of fraud, you now have a radio listening public that wants to hear from you. Please feel free to message us through our Fraudsters Radio Facebook page, and we may have you on the show as a guest. If you'd like to call in for today's show, the number is 646-668-8512.
And welcome to Fraudsters Radio. I'm Lori Z, your host, consumer advocate here. And we're going to be talking today about rental property scams. And with me is Detective Rob Lazaro. He's from the Clearwater Police Department Economic Crimes Unit. And Detective Lazaro, thank you very much for joining me today.
Oh, you're welcome. Glad to be here.
Well, Economic Crimes Unit. So explain to me and to our listeners exactly what is that?
Our unit does what we would call mostly white-collar crime, financial crimes, everything from fraud to embezzlement, forgery, counterfeiting. We're tasked with a lot of different criminal activity, all revolving around theft or financial loss. And in this case, obviously, we're going to be talking a lot about rental fraud, vacation rental scams, things like that. It's definitely something that I'm pretty familiar with. I have been with the Clearwater Police Department Economic Crimes Unit for 5 years, and I cover the Clearwater Beach area, which is a huge tourist area, one of the number one beaches, again this year. So we have a lot of vacation fraud, or a lot of people target the area for vacation frauds.
So it's high volume compared to like other parts of the country because it's on the beach.
Correct. Especially during spring break, anytime that there's a large volume of tourism, your scam artists are definitely going to try and target that area.
Yeah, and it seems to be getting worse over the years. And, you know, I know you've been interviewed by the Tampa Bay Times, and we could talk about that article a bit, maybe some of the stories you can share.
Sure.
One of the recent ones, though, that I heard about, it's hard to even believe this. I guess this was in Largo, which is not far from you. 14
Correct.
families showed up for one rental, and Nicole Johnson and David Johnson portrayed themselves as owners of the property. How exactly did that happen? Because what I read in the article was they all showed up at the same time and looked at each other like, uh-oh. So what happened in that story?
That one, like you say, Largo is right down the street. It's a different jurisdiction. I didn't personally investigate that, but it's not uncommon to have that type of thing happen. Because the person's going to advertise that rental, and he or she is just going to continue to take deposits and down payments from anybody that's willing to send them. So in that case, I don't know whether that was a vacation rental or whether that was more of a long-term rental, but it sounds like the person just left the ad up there wherever they were advertising it and just kept taking deposits and letting people, show up to a place that was probably vacant or being rented by a legitimate person.
Yeah, and I have a friend who is a realtor, and she recently told me, and this is over in Tampa now, she had a property listed for sale, and people were coming by while the owners were still, in the property, and they were knocking on the door because someone placed an ad. Of course, it said don't knock on the door, and they were anyway, and it looked like all these people were trying to rent out the property from a Craigslist ad. So that's another story. They just knock on the door. And so maybe can you share some of the more recent stories that you've had, or maybe the more egregious ones?
Sure. One of the places that's been targeted here in Clearwater the last couple of years is the Sand Pearl Resort. So it's a very, very exclusive high-end condominium complex that's right on Clearwater Beach. And just to give you an average, some of the units in there sell for anywhere from $1 million to $3 million each. They don't rent. Obviously, the association, the condominium association itself, is not going to allow people to do a short-term rental. Short-term being by the day or by the week. They even frown on rentals at all. So they had been, because of the sales of the condos, our bad guys are taking the MLS listings, meaning the pictures and the descriptions that they're getting off of any number of different websites, copying the pictures and the descriptions and putting them on Craigslist as a rental property. Once they do that, they'll get contacted by a number of people wanting to rent the space, and we were having, on a regular basis, the manager there was having people show up at the front door, which is gated, and knocking on the door, thinking that they were renting a place in there, only to find out that there are no rentals there. So that one was pretty bad, and it's still ongoing. I just checked Craigslist. Knowing that we were doing this today, I just jumped on Craigslist and looked up Clearwater Beach vacation rentals, and I can see at least 6 or 7 ads on there that are 100% fraudulent.
Now, in a case like that, are you able to get through to Craigslist? Do they do anything? Because I know in the past when I've contacted them, you can't really get them by phone. They don't really seem to care.
Yeah, there is no, as far as I know, and I've tried pretty hard to get a phone number or some kind of, human contact that I can talk to about these things, and there isn't. They have set up email accounts. There is one, a law enforcement account where I can report things that I believe or know are fraudulent. But it's no different than anybody else that flags something as a fraudulent advertisement. I go through on a fairly regular basis, especially around spring break time. I'll go through and I'll flag all the ones that I know are fraudulent, and eventually they may get taken down, but they don't get taken down immediately. It's very difficult to get anything done that way, and I think I mentioned it in the Times article. 1 year before spring break, I decided to post an ad myself, saying this is Detective Lazaro from the Clearwater Police Department, and tell them that there's a lot of vacation rental scams being advertised, and explain the ordinance to them, that there's no short-term rentals in residential condominiums and so forth, and gave my phone number for people to call me if they had any questions. And my post was actually taken down within a day or two, and I got a message from Craigslist saying that I wasn't allowed to post like that they already have warnings up. I thought that was kind of ironic.
Yeah, their warnings are on a specific page that you have to find. If you actually look, you're familiar with the website like I am, you have to go to a specific link to find that. So, and what I thought you were going to say was it got flagged probably by the fraudsters who were placing the ads can go in and flag it. And when they get enough flags, it comes down. But you're saying you actually
Craigslist.
got... Wow, yep. That's they're almost they're almost helping, or they are helping perpetrate these crimes. And I find that scary because I know another story was told to me where a woman was at home, and so her front door, which was normally locked, was unlocked in this case because she was expecting a friend to come over. And instead, a family of 4 just like walked in the door, and they looked at each other, and she said, "Who are you and what are you doing here?" And the people said, "Oh, well, we just rented this property for a month for vacation." And she's like, "What?" So apparently it was another type of thing. So it's becoming more and more common. So, I don't know. The stories to me are kind of scary. Now, do you have any idea how, the Tampa-St. Pete area relates to other areas of the country? Because I'm almost thinking, from what you're saying, the houses that are on the water are the prime real estate ones. I would think it would tend to happen there more. But does it happen in rural areas? Does it happen all over the country?
I can't say all over the country. It's certainly widespread. But obviously, if you're going to put an ad up, of course, these are all illegitimate. They're fraudulent ads. If you're going to put a fraudulent ad up, you're going to put it up in some place that's going to be very desirable. So in my case, with the majority of them being vacation rentals, it's not just Clearwater. I actually gained access to one of, I'll call him one of our bad guys' Gmail accounts and he had placed ads everywhere from Key West to Las Vegas to every tourist town that you could think of, Hawaii, you name it, all over the United States. Because obviously none of them are legitimate. He's just copying them off of the internet and then reposting them wherever they're located. So they take advantage of any place that's going to get a lot of views. It's almost like fishing. You're going to fish in the place that's going to give you the most opportunity.
Yeah, and you only need like one big fish, really. If one big fish answers it, then that's all you really need when they do.
I can tell you, in that particular case, that it's a long story, but I was able to gain access to his Gmail account. He had that account for 3 weeks. He had posted, with the help of another person, he had posted about 100 vacation rentals on Craigslist all over the United States. And during that 3-week time frame, he had 1,200 responses. So that's a lot of, even if only a portion of those actually follow through and send him money, that's a lot of money coming through. 3 weeks and 1,200 responses. So it's very lucrative. It's not going away anytime soon.
No, it doesn't sound like it. And so, maybe we could talk about what signs they should look for. Now, I looked up a little list.
Sure.
And it says, like, if the listing photos have an MLS watermark, meaning they're listed on the MLS. I mean, most of the realtors I know, if it's on the MLS, why would they list it on Craigslist? They wouldn't. See, I'm actually suspicious of almost anything that's listed on Craigslist nowadays because I know, like, for example, if I place an ad on Craigslist, I've wised up. I no longer put my phone number on there because I'll get texts day and night. It doesn't matter what time. I'll get bizarre responses back, that kind of thing. So I basically make them reply back to me with a specific set of instructions, and if they don't, or usually I can tell when it's fake, by the way they word it or very poor English. But if the listings have an MLS watermark, pretty much I would think that would be one key sign, because if it's on the MLS, you'd be able to check, like on Zillow, or one of those websites to see who's really responsible for owning it. Now, can the criminals actually list on the MLS? Well, I'm assuming if they're a realtor, they can list on the MLS. But
if they were a realtor, they could. Yep. If they were a realtor, had access to a realtor, they could. But their MLS is pretty secure, and I've never heard of any fraudulent MLS listings. The reason that the MLS watermark comes in is because they're copying the pictures from MLS. So one thing some people might not know is Google also has an image search. So if you find a photograph with an MLS listing on it, you can drop it into the Google image search, and it will bring up that photo and whatever web pages it's in. So more times than not, you drop the photo in there, and it'll bring it right up and show you that it's listed for sale on Realtor or Zillow or any number of different sites. Sometimes I'll even copy the description or copy a couple of sentences out of the description and Google search it, and you'll come up with the same thing. It'll show you on Realtor the MLS listing. Realtor's usually current. Zillow is usually will have ones that are in the past. And obviously, if you look on Zillow and you see that the house that you're trying to rent for, $200 a night was just sold for $3.5 million a few months ago, obviously that's going to raise some red flags. Nobody pays $3 million and then turns around and lets God only knows who stay in it for a couple $100. So those are pretty obvious ones.
Yeah, it's the too good to be true thing. People go, wow, $200 a night for the 3.5. It wouldn't even cover the mortgage on that kind of money.
Oh, yeah, not even close. Not even close. And, even with Craigslist now, I mean, everybody's looking for a good deal. I have a lot of victims tell me they were kind of hoping that it was real because it was such a good deal that they just said, man, I really hope it works. Well, as long as you're willing to risk the money that you're sending, that's one thing. But if it's too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true. Especially in Clearwater during spring break, the hotel rooms are somewhere starting around $250, $300 a night. So to think that you could get a 2,500 square foot condo directly on the beach for $200 or $250 a night is ridiculous. It's impossible. It's not going to happen. So If it's too good to be true, it's definitely too good to be true. I'm looking at Craigslist right now. There's several on here, but I see one. There's a home looks like it's for rent 4,300 square feet for $250 a night. Now that can't be right.
Right.
Definitely.
Right,
definitely
but some people don't know. Some people don't know. Yeah. But I do want to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, let's talk about what the criminals are doing. So we'll take a short break, and we'll be right back.
Have you received a notice of foreclosure on your property? Do you suspect that you're involved in an unfair or fraudulent loan agreement? Are you looking for a way to save your home? Would you like to cut through all the misinformation and find out what really works? Would you like to learn strategies that the so-called gurus aren't aware of? If you answered yes to any of those questions, a professional team at Mortgage Fraud Examiners can assist you and your attorney with all of these things and more. Contract breaches, errors, statutory regulatory violations, fraudulent appraisals, and other fraudulent conduct cause most mortgages to be legally problematic. In fact, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation found that nearly 2,000 financial institutions they assessed received citations for significant compliance violations. They also examined appraisals and found out that of the 259 appraisals reviewed for accuracy, only 7 fully complied with professional standards. Call us at 844-920-7200. That's 844-920-7200. Mortgage Fraud Examiners, 844-920-7200.
And we are back on Fraudsters Radio with my special guest, Detective Lazaro from the Clearwater Police Department Economic Crimes Unit, and we're talking about rental property scams. If you're listening to the show and you'd like to call in and ask a question, the number is 646-668-8512. Now, some of the things I pulled up in looking at this were like vague listing details, meaning that they're not really putting a lot of information down on the property. Do you find that's true on Craigslist, or do you find it's the opposite and they list a lot of information and make it look real?
It's probably the opposite on Craigslist because they're not writing the description, they're copying it. So they're just going to the sale, the description when it was in MLS, and they're using the realtor's description of the property, generally word for word. And in fact, it's kind of funny because sometimes you'll actually see a description that says contract pending, looking for backup offers, and then it will have the description. Oh, yeah. Well, obviously that's terminology for a sale, not a rental. It just shows that they just copied the whole entire description, popped it into a rental listing on Craigslist. So usually they're pretty detailed, and sometimes you'll actually see that they've got misinformation or information that's regarding a sale and not a rental.
Right. Now, if I wasn't from this area and I was looking to rent out a property and it didn't say for sale or pending, I would think, well, maybe some people who are selling their house, they've already vacated the property, and so maybe the owner is just renting it out, for certain periods of time until it's sold. So that, in a way, would make sense, but the low dollar amount for a high-value property doesn't match up. Now, I know, typically, like the person that's renting the property in these scams, they don't want to show it to you first, right? Like they want to just make the deal some other way,
Correct.
Email and whatever. So maybe talk a little bit about that.
Sure, and one of the things we should probably point out, because anybody listening is probably thinking, well, why do you let this happen? One thing we should point out is that 99% of all of these rental scams are being done by someone in another country. And I've tracked, really the only way for me to find out where they are is to track where the money ends up. And I've tracked money back to Malaysia, India, Nigeria, Cambodia, Dubai. You'd be amazed. But the common theme here is the money leaves the country, the suspect is in another country, and once it's gone, it's gone. I can't recover money, obviously, from Cambodia. So they're basically doing this with immunity because, they can get online and they can put these fraudulent ads in, and even if they're discovered and we, take the ad down and follow the money, they're protected in another country. So that's probably the first thing.
Yeah, and it makes me think though, if you're going to a bank to wire money, it seems to me, because we did a show on wire fraud, it seems to me like if I went to my bank and said, hey, I'm wiring money for a rental, I would think the bank would say, well, let's look at that number. Is there a way for them to see where that account is that they're wiring to before they actually wire it and let that person know? Or no, you just walk into the bank and they'll wire it anywhere and it's all on you?
There's a number of different ways that they get the money. That's the biggest difficulty for the suspects is how to get the money out of the country. You're not going to be able to wire money directly to an account in Cambodia. It's just not going to. That's not even really an issue. It never happens. I can tell you that they being the suspects have found different ways year in, year out to kind of morph the way they get their money out of the country. One year, I found a reshipping service. They were asking people to mail their money order to an address here in Clearwater. And when I tracked that address down, it turned out to be a reshipping company, basically like a UPS, although it was not UPS, where they would accept packages for a person, and then they would reship them wherever the person wanted them, in this case, Cambodia. So my suspect...
A mail forwarder.
Correct. So it would show up, and when they placed their ads and they made the negotiation with the victims, they would tell them, no, I live in Clearwater, here's my address, and it has a suite number on it, which is actually just a mailbox number. So the people think that they're mailing their money order to a local person here in Clearwater. As it turns out, those would hit a reshipper. The reshipper would send an email and a picture that says, I got a piece of mail for you, and the person in the other country would say, yep, please forward it to me, and they would send it off. So the money order would end up in Cambodia. We got pretty lucky with that because once I talked to the reshipper, they were completely cooperative and allowed the mail to keep coming in and would call me every time they got something for this person. And we were able to collect about 18 money orders, 15 to 18 money orders, and return them to the victims before the money headed overseas. Since then, a lot of people aren't willing to do money orders anymore, so PayPal has become an issue. Probably the other biggest issue is kind of interwoven scams, money mules is what we call them. So the romance scam. Romance scam is one where they'll get people online. They'll start a relationship online through any of the different websites and convince these people here in the United States that they're a U.S. citizen that's traveling abroad for any number of reasons, and talks them into receiving money and then mailing it to them, letting it come into their bank account. They withdraw it, put it in an envelope, and send it to them. That one's hugely. That one's just a huge problem. Probably 80% of the money that leaves the country is through a romance scam. And then the other very common one is work from home, and that's where they'll advertise on Craigslist and tell people that they can work from home. They get a certain percentage. There's any number of different jobs that they tell them, but it's usually that they're like an importer or exporter. They do worldwide business, and they need an accountant, so to speak, in the United States who can collect payment. And this person will end up getting a small percentage or a dollar amount per transaction, and our suspect will have the money forwarded to this person and then give them instructions on where to send it. And that's how they get it out of the country.
Wow, so it's different kinds of scams, but the scammers have put together a similar plan to get the money back out. Yeah, and so I know, like, for example, if I place an ad, let's say I place an ad on Craigslist for business purposes, a lot of times, of course, you can check the box, no soliciting to this. Well, they don't care about that, and they'll respond back sometimes with nothing more than an email link, and I think, nope, hit delete because you don't know who it's from or what it is. And I think a lot of people don't realize that if you click on that link, that could also be dangerous, correct?
Oh, absolutely. If you click on the link, the odds are it's going to be some sort of spyware where they're trying to get a hold of your email and your email contacts. Without a doubt, unsolicited things like that, you don't want to mess with them. They're phishing email, and the next thing you know, your email is being used in some sort of scam So they will definitely contact you. My sergeant placed a Craigslist ad to try and get rid of, I think it was a bed set, and he got bombarded with crazy responses where they wanted to send him a ton of much more money than it was worth, and asking him to ship it and send money here, and just it's crazy.
Yeah, I remember years ago I had a couch up for sale, and my other half went, "Oh, honey, somebody wants to buy your couch," and forwarded me the email. I took one look at it, and so I knew that the whole thing was fake. Now, don't ask me why, but it just irritated me. So I just kind of played dumb and I responded back at first, and they go back and forth, and it's like a set. It's like a set of emails they already have pre-planned because they don't usually speak English, I find. So they'll respond back and say, okay, well, we'll offer you, the couch is $600. We're going to wire you the money or for $800 or send you a check for $800, and you have to send us back the other $200. And I'm like, scam. And so I actually replied back and wrote, "Scammer, you're busted!" ! And I can tell you, the person kept responding because they didn't understand what I was saying, and they kept trying to move forward on that. And I'm realizing this person doesn't speak English. They're just following the playbook step by step, and not real. And so that's kind of obviously a clue that something's wrong.
Absolutely. There's a bunch of different clues that you can look for in their communication. Two of the ones that I find most common is they don't capitalize the letter I when referring to themselves. Everyone in the United States, I don't care how far you went through school, knows that you capitalize the I.
Right.
And if you're typing on any computer, most software that's written in English will autocorrect for you. It's almost difficult to do that. I know that some phones will let you text by using a lowercase I, but the majority of the time it's going to autocorrect for you. So when you see the letter I uncapitalized over and over again, it means that they're probably typing into an English translator. So they're using their own language, typing into a translator, and the translator isn't understanding the grammar. So
Gotcha.
The uncapitalized I is definitely one that's a dead giveaway. The other one is the word kindly. That's not a common word that you hear just talking with people in the United States. It's not used that often. But
right.
I think it must translate from, foreign language, whether it's Nigerian or it must translate for thank you or please through their translator, because you see it over and over and over again. Kindly send your money to this bank account. Kindly respond within the next 2 minutes. Kindly do this. It just strikes me as odd, but I see it over and over and over again. So those are definitely two red flags that I see, and would make me very, very wary about trusting who's on the other side of that.
Right. Now I want to read you something from the FTC website, which says,
Sure.
The FTC warns against adhering to requests for a security deposit or first month's rent before you've signed the lease and met the landlord in person. You should never pay any amount beyond an application fee before you've confirmed the space is available and the individual you're working with is associated with that property, and you've signed a contract that makes you the legal tenant. Well, while that sounds good on paper, there are people, like in the first story I mentioned, where I don't know if those people actually met them, but I'm assuming that there are situations where somebody pretends to be the landlord. Do they ever actually meet them in person, take the money, and then go on to the next one?
No.
No, they
That's
never
the short
meet them
answer.
in person.
No. I've never had a case where the person that was victimized had personally met the suspect. It's always over the phone, over email, text. There's usually some sort of reason. Everything from the FTC site is 100% true, but the one that is the most important is meet them in person. If they can't meet you in person, then they odds are they don't have the property or the right to rent that property. They've gone as far as looking up, the property appraiser's web page is available to anybody. So I had one suspect from another country. It was actually the Sand Pearl cases. He went on the property appraiser's website, looked up who the rightful owner of the condo was, and then sent emails with that name as in the signature line. if I recall correctly, he even set up a Gmail that loosely resembled the owner's name, like Mark Smith or whatever it was, Mark Smith at Gmail.
Right.
So he went an extra step to actually look up and determine who the property owner was. So even a victim that was trying to do their due diligence and figure out who owns the property would think that they're talking to Mark Smith when really they're talking to some guy in Nigeria.
Someone in Nigeria.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. All right, we're going to do another commercial break, and we'll be back in just a moment. We're talking about rental scams, but we may be talking about some other scams too. So stay with us.
There is a very high likelihood your mortgage contains an extensive error. At Mortgage Fraud Examiners, we know just how costly a missed opportunity can be. For almost 40 years, we have consulted, retained, and referred to by attorneys, lawyers, trial practitioners throughout the nation. Put another way, we are the trusted source for litigation support. A foreclosure is basically an allegation the homeowner breached the contract by failing to make timely payments. The contract is clear. The borrower promised they would make timely payments, and if they didn't, the lender could take the property. The only way to overcome the homeowner's breach is to show the lender breached first, identify errors that would void the contract, identify regulatory violations, identify appraisal fraud and other fraudulent contact, and the only way to find these wrongs is to thoroughly examine the whole mortgage transaction. This meticulous examination of your mortgage transaction and appraisal can identify legal defects that would make your mortgage unenforceable and entitle you to compensation or even free title to your property. Call us at 844-920-7200. Mortgage Fraud Examiners, that's 844-920-7200. 844-920-7200.
And we are back on Fraudsters Radio. I'm here with Detective Lazaro from the Economic Crimes Division from the Clearwater Police Department. And we're talking about rental scammers, and you don't want to just give up your money. And Detective, I can tell you we did a previous story about a woman whose 70-something-year-old mother got scammed in buying a house, not even renting. She was buying a house for $135,000. And so what I guess ended up happening was somehow the scammers are now looking at what realtors, they're getting into the realtors' email accounts, and they're looking to kind of intercept the wire money transfers from the title company. So when she got the title company wiring information and wired the money, now in this case she actually called and they said they received the money by email and by phone. But when she got there in person, they said, "Oh, we made a mistake. We never got it." Well, that money was tracked down through the FBI, and it did go to Nigeria. And unfortunately, I think they were able to get her back $18,000 out of $135,000. So it makes me very nervous when it comes to wiring money. Is there any way to protect yourself in wiring money?
Well, absolutely. That the realtor scam has been going on for it's become prevalent in the last couple of years. And I personally have been going out and talking to different realtors and doing presentations at brokers. Most of the title agencies now have put huge disclaimers on all of their emails that you're never to wire any money or make any wiring changes unless you call the number that's been predetermined beforehand to verify the wire instructions. That's one way to make sure that you're wiring to the correct place. If you've got the phone number for the title agent that you've been using the entire time, call that phone number and tell that title agent, "I just got wire instructions and they tell me to do this," and have them recite it over the phone or verify it over the phone so that you know that you're talking to the right person. Phishing emails have been going out to realtors and title agents for a long time, and they gain access to that email, and they just sit on that email waiting until the time is right that there's a transaction that has a large amount of cash moving from one point to the other, and they will just jump into that email string, give different wire instructions. That wired money will go off to a different bank account. And of course, there's going to be there could be a 2 to 8 hour delay by the time the person wires the money to when they're sitting at the closing table and waiting for the money to come through, and they finally start making some calls and find out that they wired the money to the wrong place. Well, in that 2 to 8 hours, the bad guy has already moved the money again and put it into a place where you're not going to be able to recover it.
Right, and I don't know a lot about hacking. This is a little off topic, but it sort of is on topic. So my other half, I was emailing him. This was a couple of weeks ago. I was emailing him, and then I started getting bounce backs from his email, only they were listing another email address on that email. And so we couldn't figure out. It was only when I sent him emails, I'm thinking, oh, my God, well, maybe I've been hacked. I changed my password. Still, he kept getting the bounce backs, and then it would have a different person, like, listed halfway down when it gives you the technical error. And so I contacted I have a service that can remotely go in, look at the computers, and what they found on his computer, somehow somebody hacked his computer and was forwarding all of the emails that he received to some other person, which of course we couldn't track down. But once he found that, how do they get in to be able to do that? I'm not a technical person. Do you understand enough, like, how do hackers get in and do this?
Sure. In layman terms, they're going to send you what's called a phishing email. It's going to have a link in it. I'll focus on realtors and title agents because I have quite a bit of experience with that. They will usually send closing documents to a realtor that says we're clear to close. Click on the link. There'll be a PDF attachment. It'll say click on the link to view closing documents. Well, a lot of realtors have a lot of closings, and sometimes they just don't pay attention to who's sending them the information. They click on that PDF, which will basically put a virus on their computer, and it will either log the keystrokes so that the bad guy can see what the person's typing, or it will actually give them access to that person's email. Once that happens, it's just like your other half had. They can write a rule into the email to forward emails to a certain place. I was just working with one company that had their emails hacked, and they actually had the CEO's emails had actually been a rule had been written into his email that any internal email within the company would go to a specific folder. The bad guy was monitoring that folder. He would delete the ones that he didn't want the CEO to see, and he would move the ones that he wanted him to see back into the inbox. So he was literally just monitoring every internal email that came through the system, and again running a scam on that particular business. So that's the short version is they're going to get you to click on a link.
Yeah, and I know here they especially target older people as well, right? Because they know they don't know as much about the computers. And I know, like, in my example, my mom she'll call me and say, oh, my FICO score has changed. And she forwards me the email, and I go, well, Mom, do you see it says from crazychefgirl@gmail.com? What does that have to do with FICO scores? So people don't always look at where the email is coming from. But some of the scammers are so good, like you said earlier, they can make the email match up by one digit or one letter off so that it actually looks real, right? And then, of course, if you're not paying attention, you're looking at it, well, it looks like it because you're just looking real quickly. Everybody's such a hurry nowadays. They go ahead and they click on it, and then it's all over from there.
Correct. They email the domains for the bigger companies, and when I say bigger, Walmart and FedEx and the multi-billion-dollar companies, they buy up all the domains that are even remotely close to theirs. So, like FedEx would buy anything remotely close to FedEx. So that way, if you mistyped it, you're not going to get a bad guy can't get one that's close enough to FedEx to make it look real. But smaller companies obviously can still fall victim to that. If you have Smith's Plumbing, they may do Smith's Plumbing without the L, and then they can buy that domain, which costs next to nothing, and then they can start sending emails using that, and it's just a letter or two off from the real thing. And that's how they were doing. I had a title company where they bought the same name, but it was Tittle. They spelled it Titel. So if you weren't paying attention, obviously it looks like the right title company. It's just two letters were transposed, and that was a wire fraud where somebody lost, like you say, $120,000. So you definitely have to pay attention. The other thing you can do is if you hover your mouse over the common name that you see, so it'll come from, say, Mark Smith, look at the reply address. A lot of times on these scam emails, the reply address, like you say, will be something weird that has nothing to do with whoever you're talking to. That's because the bad guys have gotten access to a server. It's unfortunate, but educational servers, colleges, a lot of times get taken advantage of because they allow so much remote access to the servers. Bad guys will hack into that server, and they'll start sending these scam emails from an email address that has a .edu on it, meaning they're using a educational server to send out scam.
It's getting scarier. Well, and going back, I want to go back a little bit to the rental scam. So some of the ploys used by scammers to steal rent money. I like this one. Renting with the intent of renting to others. That almost seems stupid to me because if they were legitimately renting it, well, then I guess the property management or landlord didn't check them out good enough. But, they rent out because they can rent out a property and then show it to other renters, collect the first and last month's rent, security deposit, and then they can do that multiple times, and then they skip out of town. Except those are cases where the people actually, I think, get caught because if they're in town and they're renting it out, But then when it says renting on behalf of the owner, the scam artist claims to be helping someone else rent out the property because they say they're too sick or they're out of town or there's some other problem. That's something else that they have to look at. And then, of course, you talked about the Nigerian rental scams. Yeah, and I guess what I don't understand, because I like to think all people are good, and I know that's not true, why don't countries like Nigeria or Malaysia, do they have any reciprocity with the United States on any of these scams? And why do they allow those countries, why do the countries themselves allow the scams to go through? Will they cooperate with the United States or not at all?
Well, that's kind of above my pay grade. I don't deal with international. I will tell you that I am on several task force, and I have asked the question before, and basically you have to understand, my guy that was in Cambodia, he comes and advertises here in Clearwater every year, and every year I catch him. I know the names that he uses. A couple of times I've had the address where he has the money sent. I could look on Google Maps and see the little building that he stays in, but I wasn't able to get anything done with that. And when you look at the big picture, you're talking about even a couple of $100,000, $1 million, trying to get cooperation to allow the United States to go into Cambodia and physically arrest some guy for a property crime, as it were. You're going to arrest him on a property crime and then try and get him extradited back to the United States. There's got to be a lot of money involved. Occasionally you'll read in the papers, I think India, the IRS scam was really big for a while, where they would call and say that you're going to be arrested if you don't pay your back due taxes immediately.
Right.
That one was going around quite a bit. Well, I think it was India just arrested a bunch of people on that one. Occasionally you'll get cooperation here or there, but like I say, it has to be large amounts of money. Small amounts, they're not going to, for obvious reasons, we're not going to be able to get anyone in Nigeria or Cambodia to cooperate to get somebody because they scammed a few $1,000s here or there.
Yeah, it's sad though, because I mean, for the people here, like the woman whose mother lost $135,000, that was her life savings. But I know there's just not enough people. It just seems like there should be some better way. It seems like the criminals are always, not just one step ahead, but 10 steps ahead. And then they're in countries that don't allow, you to do anything. And so they know they can get away with it. But it's just, I don't know. I guess it's very disappointing for the victims of the crime.
Absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly. But as for the countries themselves, and this is obviously just my opinion, but when you have tens of millions of dollars in scam money coming into these countries, these are countries that don't have a lot of money, so that money is being brought in. It's being used there locally. It's being brought into their economy. They're not all that quick to end that revenue stream, whether it's legal or not.
All right. Well, we're gonna take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk about. We've been talking about rental properties. I want to talk about how to avoid getting scammed when someone's renting an apartment. So stay with us.
Sure.
We'll be right back.
Consumers, do you have bad credit? Can't purchase a house or car? Paying too much in interest on your credit cards and loans? Scammed by credit repair companies? There is hope. You can get back on track and do it the right way. Call Credit Education Consultants today at 813-500-6064. That's 813-500-6064. Or go to crediteducationconsultants.com now and get the help you need. Don't delay. Call today. Mortgage reps and realtor inquiries are also welcomed.
And we are back on Fraudsters Radio. I'm here with Detective Lazaro from the Clearwater Police Department Economic Crimes Unit, and we've been talking about, mostly rental home, like vacation home properties. But I know it also happens when people try to rent an apartment, especially if they're out of state. Okay, so now, I've learned, because I myself have been defrauded, and I know lots of people that have too. And when it happens, it kind of makes you look a lot harder if you've been a victim at giving up your money so easily. So when you're going to, to rent an apartment, if you're out of state, I think it's a lot harder than if you're in state and you're local and you can go to, say, the leasing department and do that. But if you're renting a property from out of state, one of the tips that I read was, never pay cash. Because, again, cash is just like wiring money. It's not necessarily traceable. The other thing is viewing online reviews with suspicion. Okay, so now, I'm an honest person, so I think when people write online reviews, I always used to think, hey, all these people are saying this service or this product is great. And then someone once said to me, people at the company can just hire people or get all their friends to write online reviews that are great, because most companies don't verify. I think Yelp might verify, but most companies don't verify. So when you look at online reviews, do you have to look at them suspiciously?
Oh, absolutely. There's companies out there that will specifically help businesses and so forth work on their public image. That's specifically what they do, is go out and try and increase their profile with positive reviews and so forth. So certainly, like you were saying, a whole bunch of positive reviews on a particular place, you have to use some skepticism with them, because, I don't know about you, but I don't go online and make reviews all that often. So if you see a whole bunch of positive ones, you probably got to wonder why are all these people, either it's an absolutely fantastic place, so much so that everybody feels compelled to go out and write a review, or they're using a service that's writing them for them.
I didn't even know there were services that write them for them. But I can tell you, I once checked out a business where I thought it was odd that there were probably 4 or 5 reviews, consecutively, and they were all 3 or 4 sentences long. And even though they used different words linguistically, it looked like, or sounded like, it was all written by the same person. And that kind of made my hair stand up. And I went, I don't know. It just doesn't look right to me. Something about it, the way they were all written, didn't look right. So I didn't realize that you could actually hire a service to do that. I'd like to think that people are honest, but I'm finding, a lot of times they're not. Now, when you're renting out an apartment, one of the things here it says is to check your lease carefully and make sure that, everything is disclosed. And the thing that I find is a lot of people, whether they're buying a house or renting a property, is they don't read everything that's in that documentation. It's kind of like when you get the credit card changes and people just throw away the little insert and it says, hey, we're raising your interest up 10% because you made a late payment, and you went ahead and used the card. Well, if you don't read it, then you don't know. And if you don't understand it, then you need to find someone, maybe an attorney, right, that would be able to help you decipher what's on there.
Sure. Yep. A lot of them are fairly easy to read, and if you don't understand it, you should get back with whoever you're renting from and have them clarify anything that doesn't seem correct. If it's a legitimate place, they're going to explain all of the details of the lease to you. and make sure that you understand it before you sign any documentation. On the other hand, if it is a scam or a fraudulent advertisement or what have you, they're probably not going to be able to describe much of it because they really don't understand English that well, and they're just using a form.
Gotcha. Now, one of the other tips was to consider using a broker and making sure that the broker is licensed, because you can check in each state whether or not a broker is licensed. So that can protect. What other ways can you think of for people that they can protect themselves? If you're listening to the show, like, what would you say to someone who's considering renting out, whether it's a vacation home or, or a house? What would you start with?
I would start, if I'm going to search online for any kind of rental, I would go with a very legitimate, big name website, whether it's something like VRBO, some of the websites that actually collect verified information. The problem with your Craigslist and some of your smaller rental websites is they specifically, at Craigslist, you can post an ad. I don't know if you've ever done it before, but you can post an ad with nothing more than an email. And as we all know, you can get an email address with no verified information whatsoever. I can go online right now and get a Gmail that says whatever name I want to, for the most part, and not put any verified information. Verified meaning I'm not paying for it, so I don't have to put a credit card information or a PayPal. I don't have to give them my name, address, phone number. I really don't have to give them anything, and the stuff they do ask for I can lie about, and they're still going to give me the Gmail account. So, when you have all these different ways to be anonymous on these websites, it's just ripe for suspects to go in and post all kinds of fraudulent posts. On VRBO, any of these paid sites, at least they have to put in a credit card, and they have to put in some verifying information. Now, that's not to say that they can't steal someone's identity and their credit card number and so forth and still place the ad, but it's much, much less common. The suspects are looking for anonymity. That's why they take advantage of things like Craigslist. And unfortunately, as we, the younger crowd is becoming so used to communicating via text and email that they fall victim of this over and over again. They just believe that they're talking to the people that they think they're talking to, and they don't do a lot of background check. They don't think about, well, maybe I should verify and see if this person owns the property. None of that really crosses their mind, and they fall victim quite often.
Yeah, that's scary because I'm reading through this thing where it says rental scam tips for property owners. So this is for the property owner part, where it says keep a watchful eye on your home, but change locks frequently if you rent out your property often. Because if your previous tenants have copies of the keys, they can still get into the home. And I can tell you, I live in a property now that I rented out years ago, and someone came and changed the back door while it was vacant and stole all the appliances. So it's getting pretty easy for these thieves to do what they do. With potential tenants, it says ask for references and following up by them. And in reverse, if you're renting out a property, if you want to rent out a property, I would be like looking in through public records myself, the tax assessor's office, to see who really owns it. Because if you're renting it out from someone, even if they say on the phone they're a broker, this and that, I'm so suspicious at this point, I'd have to look everything up in public records, and then I'd also check to see if that they have any type of criminal activity against them. I don't think most people go that far, though, right? Most people are, like you said, especially the younger crowd, they're just thinking, hey, it's okay, they don't want to actually talk to anybody. That's the problem with the younger generation. Whereas the older people, we want to actually see somebody eye to eye or talk to them. But again, once people get older into their 60s and 70s and 80s, I think they're more prone to fraud because they just don't understand the technicalities of using the computer. Correct?
Sure, and the older generation is a lot more trusting, so they do tend to fall victim as well. Don't get me wrong; this happens all the way across the spectrum of ages. There's no one or the other. It's common across the board. I think that you're exactly right. Some of the older folks, they want to talk face to face, which is definitely one of the biggest things. The biggest things that you have to try and do, get face to face with someone. You can't do an entire transaction. You don't want to be sending money to somebody that you've literally never seen and can't verify where in the entire world they're located. Because just because they have a 727 area code on their cell phone or on their phone doesn't mean that they're actually located here in Clearwater. That could be voice over internet. They could again be sitting in Nigeria and still have that area code. Those aren't geographically located anymore. And then obviously email, can email from anywhere. So actually getting in front of somebody, meeting them before you transfer money, because all of the scam artists are going to tell you that they're going to meet you at the property. All of them do. But it's always after you've put down, your down payment and your deposit and your cleaning fee and all this other thing. They're going to meet you there to give you the key and everything else. But of course, they never show up. The other thing I would suggest is,
Yep.
If you're renting vacation properties, I think you already said it, but it probably bears mentioning again. Look up your own broker or your rental service and have a rental service. If you're gonna come to Clearwater on spring break and you're going to stay here for a week, you're going to spend a few $1,000s. It's worth getting a broker here locally to verify your rental property, your status, and everything else. And that way, if there is a problem, you've got a real brick-and-mortar business here in Clearwater that you can show up at the door and say, hey, something went wrong, and hopefully they're going to take care of it for you, as opposed to just showing up at a rental property that isn't for rent.
Right, and you mentioned one key thing too is the spoofing of the phone numbers, because now I can tell you I get I get calls probably 10 times a day. I'm on the do not call, but the area code and the first 3 digits are the same as mine. So I think the criminals are going, well, if I make it look a lot like her phone number, she'll think, hey, I'm somebody local that she can do business with. And so at this point, I have one of those programs that like blocks out calls that I don't know. But, again, I think you just have to be very cautious with everything that you do nowadays. And I think your advice was really good. Any last key advice before we go?
No, I think we've covered everything up to this point. Hopefully that really, with these suspects generally being out of the country, the only way to really stop this activity is to educate victims prior to being victimized. That's why we try and talk about it. With the department has a Facebook page, and they put it out there every year, trying to get the word out to be more careful, because, like you say, it's really upsetting for people when they come here and they show up to what they think is going to be a nice vacation and find out that it's a gated community and they can't even get in the parking lot. So you got to do some research and be careful.
Now, if any of the listeners are in the Clearwater area and they want to get a hold of you, how do they get a hold of the Clearwater Police Department?
Sure. There's 2 ways. You can call the main line. It's 727-562-4242. And let me look up. We have a fraud hotline as well.
Right, and I know you have your Facebook page too, because I know you recently posted about the rental scams.
Correct. Yep. And we try and keep up on that on a regular basis.
Because people can call to give you tips, correct?
They can. They can call up, tell us. I get a lot of calls from realtors here saying, hey, I have a condo for sale out on Clearwater Beach, and it's being advertised on Craigslist. I'm getting calls from different people and so forth, and it's tough for them as well. Once it's listed on Craigslist, about all I can tell is go on and hit the flag. The advertisement is prohibited. It's the same thing that I do, and I send off an email to Craigslist saying that this isn't any good. But if the person is in Nigeria, as soon as it gets taken down, they just put it right back up. So it's just a difficult time. So the fraud hotline number for Clearwater is, again, 727-562-4424, and you can call. If people have questions about whether it's a particular property or anything, they get a phone call from somebody that says they're going to be arrested for back taxes. You can call the fraud hotline. We'll usually be able to get back to you within a few hours and talk with you about whatever issues you're having and give you at least some advice as to whether that's going to be a fraud or a scam.
Great. I want to thank you so much, and I hope to have you back on the show because I'd like to do another one on the romance scams. So would you join me for another show?
Absolutely.
Oh, very good. All right. Well, thank you, Detective, for joining me. And for our listeners, thanks for joining us today on Fraudsters Radio. You can join us again next Monday from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Time live. Remember, we do want to hear your stories, and you can contact us through the Fraudsters Radio Facebook page.